Welcome back into the Bangtan universe wormhole. Today our subject is the MV for Spring Day. There's a lot going on in there, and even though parts of it seem to relate to the BU, parts of it are clearly about something else. Now, Spring Day isn't the only non-canon video to contain canon BU content, but it is the most famous. So I think you'll enjoy a little dig into the BU content of the Spring Day MV, plus a couple of BU Easter eggs hidden deep within the Spring Day lyrics. So let's buckle up and head into the BU wormhole. We'll start with a very brief explanation of BU canon, since some fans of the BU can be confused about what's official and what isn't. As you know, the HYYH era marked the formal debut of the BU, but you might not know that at some point in the Love Yourself era, Big Hit went back through BTS's older MVs and added notes to the descriptions of some of them saying they were certified canon. This implies that MVs without that label are not canon, and the Spring Day MV didn't get that label. Well, after the Love Yourself era, Big Hit didn't add labels to any new MVs, even though some of them, Film Out in particular, certainly seem like canon. In fact, Big Hit even removed the labels from all the older canon MVs somewhere around 2019 or 2020. Maybe they did that to create suspense about the newer MVs and or to make room for more MVs like Spring Day, which aren't totally canon, but which contain canon. Anyway, here's a list of all of the MVs which were labeled canon, and if you scroll down, you'll see a list of other materials which are considered canon. Please note that Begin's Youth is not on this list. We know it's not canon because it contradicts canon. For instance, here's a non-spoiler example. It makes Kim Chung-jun a student under Principal Joe, when canon tells us the two were classmates. Maybe BU enthusiasts should keep Begin's Youth in mind as we go forward, remembering that anything which contradicts known canon cannot be considered canon. But nothing in Spring Day contradicts canon, so we can still study the song and the MV for canon material. Just one question. The Spring Day song and MV aren't canon because they're not primarily about the BU. Long ago, R.E.M. and Suga said that they wrote the song about missing friends. But from the very beginning, ARMY have also connected Spring Day to the Sewol ferry disaster. I'll give you a brief description of that event, but before I do, I'll issue a trigger warning based on this image. If this makes you not want to know any more about the Sewol ferry disaster, then just cover your ears or turn off your sound until this image disappears. Now here's a very short version of the Sewol ferry disaster. In 2014, the ferry was traveling toward Jeju Island with a passenger list that was made up primarily of high school students. The ferry capsized, and as it began to sink, crew members told all the passengers to stay put and await rescue. The students obeyed and drowned. The crew who told them to stay abandoned ship and lived. The Korean government was so ashamed by what happened that they clamped down on reports of the tragedy and blacklisted celebrities who talked about it. That meant BTS's hands were tied, so they quietly visited the families of the victims and made donations to an organization supporting them. Then in 2017, they coded their own feelings about the tragedy into a song and an MV, each of which was about several things. But Koreans knew all along that Spring Day was really about the ferry tragedy. And 6 years later, BTS were finally able to confirm that the song was primarily about the Sewol ferry tragedy. If you want to learn more about this horrible event, you'll find plenty of material online. You can also find videos that point out all the Sewol ferry references in the Spring Day video. But because I'm not qualified to talk about this subject at length, and because this channel focuses on the BU, this video will only focus on the BU references in Spring Day. You've probably noticed that trains play a huge role in the Spring Day MV. Well, one of the most important pieces of graffiti in the HYYH era videos is this: "My life has been ruined by this train." To figure out what the sentence means, imagine you're riding on a train. You're stuck inside a vehicle that only lets you on and off at certain points, so for long periods of time, you're basically trapped on one track. Or, to put it in a BTS way, you're stuck on one path. On top of that, you're cut off from a world that's whipping by you almost too fast for you to see clearly. How would you feel about living your entire life on a train? Would you think that the train had ruined your life? Or look at it another way. The highlight reel begins with a multitude of branching train tracks, which represent the multitude of choices Seokjin faces in his frustrating time loops. And don't get me started on the ways he torments himself for this girl just because he wants to get closer to her. I might make another video later about all the train symbolism in the BU, but in this video we're focusing on Spring Day's train. I need to begin with V, even though his scene doesn't actually relate to the BU. The problem here is that some armies watch this scene and misinterpret it, thinking he's trying to kill himself like he did on the platform at the sea. That's not the case. I'll put this as delicately as I can. If you want to get killed by a train, you wait until you see the train. There's no train in sight here, but V is putting his ear to the track so he can listen for one. He's waiting for the arrival of someone he misses. The very first word of Spring Day, Bogo Shipda, means I miss you. V hopes that when winter ends and spring arrives, the person he misses will return. But there's more than one train in Spring Day. The lyrics refer to Snowpiercer, a train in a science fiction film. In this movie, the whole world is buried under ice and snow, and the last of humanity is packed aboard a single train which just runs in circles around a frozen planet. So even though the Snowpiercer is full of people, it's still alone. And Jungkook is like the Snowpiercer here because he's traveling alone through a frozen world. Now there's a second Easter egg buried in the name Snowpiercer, but before I explain it to you, I need to talk about Omelas. The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas is a fantasy short story written by Ursula K. Le Guin. It starts by describing a city that's perfect in every way. Omelas doesn't have modern medicine and technology, but everyone is happy, healthy, clean, intelligent, and sophisticated in a way our world wishes it could be. There's just one problem. The existence of Omelas depends on the misery of a single child. Someone who doesn't even have a name, who's trapped in a filthy basement, and who's never shown even a scrap of kindness. Every citizen of Omelas is told about this child when they're old enough to understand, and almost all of them accept the quote-unquote necessity of the child's suffering. It makes them uncomfortable, but very few of them are uncomfortable enough to actually walk away from Omelas. And now, before I connect Omelas to the BU, let's circle back to Snowpiercer for that second Easter egg. Just let me warn you, it's a bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, you can cover your ears or turn off your sound again until this image is gone. Now here we go. It turns out that what keeps the Snowpiercer moving is a little boy who's been crammed into a small space and forced to work the engine. That's not too far from the miserable child of Omelas, is it? Now let's carry that idea back to Jungkook's character in the BU. Sometimes his Hyungs treat him well, and Yoongi can be a good mentor when he's in a good headspace of his own. But sometimes Jungkook's Hyungs ignore him, and when Yoongi's in a bad headspace, he lashes out at Jungkook and pushes him away. The fact that Jungkook is sometimes happy and sometimes miserable might explain why this sign at the Omelas motel keeps flickering between vacancy and no vacancy. Inside the motel, things aren't much different. Jungkook starts out having a great time with all his friends, but the mood gradually sours, and in the end he's alone in the dark. This scene tracks very well with the BU. In HYYH The Notes Book 1, once school ends and Jungkook's friends go their separate ways, he starts hanging out alone by the river at night, taking comfort in darkness. He also takes comfort in darkness at the end of Notes 2, when he hangs out alone in dark gaming rooms. But this shot at the end of Spring Day seems to predict a reunion between Jungkook and his Hyungs, when we see them leave the train together, it's like they're all walking away from Omelas. Their BU characters are refusing to abandon Jungkook, and BTS themselves are refusing to accept a world that lets children suffer. But what would this channel be without references to time travel, wormholes, and the multiverse? We can find those in the Spring Day video too. Let's start with time travel, which shows up in the second Easter egg from the song lyrics. We'll revisit this scene, but this time we'll use Dulcet Bangtan's translation of the lyrics instead of the translation provided by the MV. Now, maybe you think you should always trust Big Hit's translations above all others, but if you do, just remember the 2022 Festa dinner, when the janky subtitles made a bunch of ARMYs think BTS were disbanding instead of just taking a break for solo activities. Dulcet Bangtan is generally considered to be the go-to source of BTS lyric translations, and Dulcet gives us a very different, very interesting take on the first line here. My mind leaps through time. This is interesting because, as Dulcet also says, the line is a reference to a 2006 anime film called The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. If you look up that title, you'll find out that not only is the film about time travel, but the girl who leaps through time keeps returning to the same day, just like Seokjin does in the BU. Moving on, here's a scene showing how the time loops might appear from Seokjin's point of view, or how they might feel. Here you can see multiple versions of the other members on the stairs above him, and as the camera pulls back, you just see more and more of them. This scene really gives us an idea of how lost and helpless Seokjin must feel, and how his friends have no idea what he's going through on their behalf. Finally, here's a scene where one version of Jungkook, who's rediscovered his friends, locks eyes with another version of himself who's still alone on the train. We saw something similar in the Japanese version of the Blood, Sweat, and Tears video, when Jimin saw an alternate version of himself. But in that scene, one of the two Jimins was pulled backwards through a wormhole. When I ask myself why neither of the Jungkooks gets pulled through a wormhole, I think about how quickly this Jungkook gets pulled away by the train, which seems to have strayed in from another universe anyway. How else would you explain a very short alley which seems to lead behind the scenes of the MV to a high-speed train tunnel that comes from a different scene? I tend to see that alley as a wormhole which pops into being just for a moment, just long enough for the two versions of Jungkook to see each other. Then boom, they're gone. Now, before I say goodbye, I'd like to leave you with a final point to ponder. Many ARMYs have noticed the similarity between this scene near the end of Spring Day and this scene near the end of Yet to Come. But there's an important difference between the two, and I'm not talking about snow versus desert or train versus bus. I'm talking about the members' expressions. In Spring Day, everyone looks melancholy except for V, who's looking out the window with a hopeful expression. But in Yet to Come, everyone looks peaceful except V, who's looking out the window with a somber expression. Does this mean the BU's resident prophet is worried about what's yet to come? Give us your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe the changing expressions in Yet to Come versus Spring Day are a hint of things to come? How do you interpret the party scenes that occur in the Omelas Hotel? And what have you found in the MV that we missed? We want this to be an interactive channel, so please do share your thoughts with us. And one last thing before you go. Please take a moment to like our video and subscribe to our channel. That helps us get noticed by the YouTube algorithm, which helps you find our latest content. Apo Bangpo.